activated, it emitted a soft humming sound and began to rotate a connected flywheel without any external power source. It was, according to its creator, a self-sustaining energy generator, and it terrified everyone who saw it work. Her tubes had no corporate backing, no university affiliation, and no legal team. What he did have was an obsession with magnetic fields and a deeply unorthodox understanding of physics. He called his creation the Angel Light Engine, a term inspired by his belief that it tapped into natural forces not yet understood by mainstream science. He built it using components from military surplus stores and discarded MRI machines. To most, it looked like a bizarre science fair project. But when he invited journalists and engineers to observe, something unexplainable happened. The engine turned on and didn't stop. Witnesses reported that the device not only powered itself, but could produce enough torque to drive mechanical systems. Hertube claimed the engine worked by creating a vacuum inversion chamber, where opposing magnetic fields generated a constant differential pressure mimicking the vacuum energy believed to exist in deep space. It was, in essence, a machine that borrowed energy from nothing and gave back more than it took. Shortly after his public demonstration, Hertube was visited by what he described as men in suits. He was questioned about his background, the source of his materials, and whether he intended to sell or patent the invention. A week later, his workshop burned to the ground in what was ruled an electrical fire. Despite the fact that the building had no grid connection and no active power at the time, no physical remnants of the engine survived the fire. Haribes tried to rebuild, but reported increasing surveillance, interference with his shipments, and repeated vandalism. He retreated from public view, later surfacing with new inventions, including bulletproof armor and electromagnetic devices, but never again discussed the vacuum engine. In 2018, he died in a mysterious single-vehicle accident. Skeptics dismiss the story as classic pseudoscience, an over-ambitious tinkerer chasing impossible physics, but others point to the consistency of his claims, the corroborated witness accounts, and the suspicious timing of the fire. The vacuum engine never received formal analysis, but its memory remains a symbol of what could have been. A power source without pollution, without infrastructure, without control. If vacuum energy truly exists, and if someone ever learned to harness it, what would happen to every industry built on scarcity? What happens when energy becomes free and unstoppable? The infinite battery. In 1973, a retired aerospace engineer named Carl Kordesh unveiled a prototype battery so durable that it threatened to make entire industries obsolete. Designed initially for use in long-range military radios and satellites, the unit was a hybrid of alkaline and hydrogen fuel cell technology. A power source capable of running continuously for up to 50 years without needing replacement or recharge. It was lightweight, rechargeable, and shockingly efficient. But after a few quiet tests and muted press coverage, the project was buried under decades of silence. Kordesh had already been instrumental in the development of the first alkaline battery and had worked on early fuel cells for NASA. His breakthrough came from merging the chemical stability of alkaline manganese dioxide with a closed-loop hydrogen system, allowing the battery to regenerate itself during operation. Unlike lithium-ion batteries, which degrade over time and require costly, dangerous mining for materials, Kordesh's design used common elements and minimal moving parts. It generated a continuous current even when idle, and could function in extreme temperatures. When he presented the battery to energy regulators and corporate partners, the response was tepid. One representative from a major electronics manufacturer reportedly said, "This battery would last longer than any of our products. That's not sustainable for us." No licensing deal was signed. No further testing contracts were awarded. And despite its potential to revolutionize personal electronics, transportation, and even space travel, the design was shelved. Documents from Kordesh's personal archive, later made public by his estate, showed he had pitched the technology to multiple governments and corporations. Most meetings ended the same way, interest followed by silence. He was encouraged to refocus on more commercially viable solutions, meaning products that would need replacing regularly. Attempts to patent the full regeneration system stalled under claims of insufficient industrial applicability. In 1982, A private investor attempted to relaunch the battery under a new company, promising power for life. Within 6 months, the startup collapsed. No units were ever produced at scale. The remaining prototypes kept in storage were later confiscated during a regulatory inspection for compliance review. They were never returned. Today, most battery technology remains trapped in cycles of planned obsolescence. Phones, electric vehicles, and power tools all require frequent recharging or replacement. And behind each cycle is a mountain of e-waste, toxic mining, and profit margins that rely on failure. What if that cycle was never necessary? What if we had already invented the perfect battery and then buried it because perfection was too dangerous to sell, the magnet drive motor? In the late 1970s, an unassuming physicist named Howard Johnson submitted a patent that would later be called impossible, unprovable, and by some deliberately suppressed. His claim was outrageous, that he had developed a magnetic motor capable of continuous motion without fuel, combustion, or electricity. The engine, powered solely by repelling magnetic fields, could rotate indefinitely once started. In 1980, to the astonishment of many, the U.S. Patent Office granted patent number 4100 to 51,531 for a permanent magnet motor. Then, just as quickly as it emerged, the story disappeared. Johnson's design was deceptively simple. An array of curved permanent magnets arranged along a stator interacting with equally precise magnets on a rotor. As the magnets passed each other, they created a cascading push, a sequence of rotational force that appeared, at least in demonstration, to sustain motion without input. Skeptics called it a trick. Engineers insisted it violated the second law of thermodynamics. But Johnson maintained that the motor didn't create energy. It merely released potential energy already stored within magnetic field. He demonstrated it privately to journalists, physicists, and investors. Some believed, others scoffed. What everyone agreed on was this: the design didn't behave like any known machine. The response from the scientific community was swift and cold. Major journals refused to publish his findings. Labs that tried to replicate his work either failed or reported inexplicable interference in their setups. Magnetic field disruptions, spontaneous demagnetization, or instability in motion. Some speculated the motor required materials or alignment so precise that replication was impossible without access to Johnson's original workshop. As interest grew, Johnson found himself under increasing pressure. Legal challenges emerged regarding the scope of his patent. Several companies that expressed interest in licensing the design abruptly withdrew. One collaborator reported that offers were made to purchase and bury the patent for a sum that would ensure Johnson's silence. He refused. By the late 1980s, Johnson was out of funding. His health declined. He gave fewer interviews. In one of his last recorded statements, he said, "They didn't have to disprove me. They just had to outlast me." He died in 2008. His motor unbuilt on a commercial scale. His legacy left in half-forgotten patent records and scattered technical papers. To this day, the idea of a magnetic motor remains taboo in scientific circles, labeled as pseudoscience or conspiracy, despite the official existence of the patent. But if Johnson was right, even partly, his invention may have unlocked one of the last untapped sources of mechanical energy: silent, clean, and outside corporate control. So the question remains, did his motor truly break the laws of physics, or did it break something more sacred, the laws of profit, the trash fuel converter? In 2003, deep within a warehouse on the outskirts of São Paulo, Brazil, a small group of engineers unveiled a prototype they believed would end two global crises at once: energy scarcity and waste pollution. Their invention, roughly the size of a shipping container, could convert everyday household garbage into high-grade cleaning fuel. No smoke, no emissions, no toxic byproducts, just garbage in, gasoline out. The process they used was a tightly guarded innovation based on thermal depolymerization enhanced by proprietary catalysts and high-pressure chambers. Unlike incineration or basic pyrolysis, their system could break down organic and synthetic material at a molecular level, reassembling carbon chains into usable fuel with over 80% conversion efficiency. Old shoes, plastic bottles, even food waste, All could be turned into clear liquid fuel, indistinguishable from commercial gasoline. They called their projects Project Gaia. Early demonstrations caught the attention of local politicians, environmental groups, and international media. One test of the powered a diesel generator for 48 hours using nothing but fuel derived from mixed urban garbage. Another produced fuel cleaner than what passed Brazil's regulatory standards. The technology wasn't just promising, it was working, and then suddenly, it was gone. Within 2 months of a viral news segment airing on a national network, the facility was raided. Officials cited violations of environmental processing licenses. Machinery was confiscated for inspection, permits were suspended, no arrests were made, no charges were filed, and no explanation was given. 1. The engineers behind Project Gaia vanished from the public eye. One was reported to have relocated to Uruguay, another later surfaced working in unrelated software development. Requests for interviews were declined. Attempts to locate the confiscated prototype were met with redacted documents and regulatory dead ends. A Freedom of Information request filed by an independent journalist years later uncovered internal memos between government agencies and private energy firms. One memo dated weeks before the raid warned of disruptive fuel synthesis devices posing threat to existing infrastructure. Another suggested containment strategies for technologies bypassing traditional refining models. Today, the problem of waste has only grown more severe. Landfills overflow, plastic chokes oceans, and energy prices continue to climb. Yet, few remember the Brazilian machine that seemed to solve both. Skeptics say the system likely had undisclosed flaws, that scaling the process might have introduced dangerous emissions or unstable reactions. But the absence of data, the silence of its creators, and the swift and complete suppression of a working prototype raised darker questions. What if trash could be gold? And someone decided the world wasn't ready for that kind of alchemy. The illness prediction, scanner. In 2009, in a modest medical research lab in Geneva, a group of biomedical engineers developed a device unlike anything seen in conventional diagnostics. Roughly the size of a shoebox, this prototype could scan a person's electromagnetic field and detect cellular anomalies long before symptoms appeared. It didn't rely on X-rays, blood samples, or MRIs. Instead, it mapped biorefrequency signatures, comparing them to a vast database of disease markers. The results in early tests were startlingly accurate. The team behind the project called it Neuroscope. In clinical trials with terminally ill patients, the device consistently identified the presence of malignant growths weeks and in some cases months before they were visible through imaging. For neurological disorders, it detected early-stage Parkinson's and Alzheimer's based on subtle shifts in neural resonance. In controlled settings, it even flagged chronic conditions in subjects who had yet to be formally diagnosed. The underlying principle wasn't entirely new. For decades, fringe researchers had speculated that the human body emits a unique electromagnetic field influenced by its internal health. But the Neuroscope was the first to quantify and interpret those frequencies using machine learning, BOF feedback, and ultra-sensitive sensors capable of registering deviations in the body's harmonic patterns. Hospitals in Switzerland and Germany quietly began requesting pilot units. The World Health Organization took note. A pharmaceutical executive shown a demonstration reportedly asked, "If this works, why would anyone need routine screenings?" That question may have sealed the device's fate. Weeks later, the company's research license was suspended, pending an investigation into data irregularities. Their servers were seized. Their lead engineer, a Romanian national, was deported for visa violations. All manufacturing contracts were voided. Public statements cited concerns over medical accuracy, but no conclusive rebuttal was ever issued. The Neuroscope vanished before it ever reached the market. Attempts to revive the project through private investors failed. The rights to the core technology were acquired through a shell corporation and have since remained inactive. Independent labs that tried to rebuild a system based on open source fragments reported interference during calibration. Some accused the original team of deliberately omitting key components from their shared designs. Rumors persist that a working version still exists, used quietly in the high-security medical facilities. Others claim it was dismantled because it posed a catastrophic risk to one of the most profitable sectors of modern healthcare, diagnostics. What if a machine could detect illness before it happened, and no one wanted you to have it? Conclusion: these inventions scattered across decades and continents do not form a random collection of curiosities. They reveal a pattern, a chilling model of suppression and erasure. They were not hoaxes. They were not flawed experiments. They were working systems dismantled not by the laws of nature, but by the hands of men who saw too far, built too well, and threatened to shift power from the few to the many. Each case points to a methodical resistance, a system where breakthroughs are filtered through the lens of profitability and control. From Nikola Tesla's wireless power to a trash fuel generator in Brazil, these innovations were not evaluated by their potential to help humanity, but by the danger they posed to established hierarchies. The destruction was never loud. It came in silence through seized patents, revoked funding, inexplicable fires, vanished labs, and lives ended in obscurity. What was lost is not just machinery, but the future itself. A future where light bulbs didn't need replacing, where engines ran on air, where pollution vanished, where a disease could be seen before it struck. These were not simply ideas, they were turning points, and someone somewhere chose to turn away. The eraser continues. Whistleblowers disappear. Alternative engineers are smeared. Patents are bought, buried, and forgotten. These 10 cases may be only fragments of a much deeper story. The visible tips of inventions buried in time, behind closed doors, behind locked vaults, and behind silence. The tragedy is not that these technologies failed. The tragedy is that they worked. And that